Rebecca Stone's voice sliced through the pristine marble lobby like a blade cutting silk. Security, remove this woman immediately. The water bottle tilted in her manicured hand, and clear liquid arced through the air in what felt like slow motion. Aaliyah Carter's eyes widened as the cold stream splashed across her face, soaking her expensive silk blouse and dripping from her chin onto designer leather shoes. People like you don't belong here, Rebecca sneered, her empty bottle still raised like a weapon of humiliation. 15 employees stood frozen in the corporate lobby of Carter Tech Solutions, their phones capturing every devastating drop. The elegant black woman in business attire said nothing, just stood there with water streaming down her face, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light like a beacon of dignity amidst the chaos. Rebecca smiled triumphantly, completely unaware that she had just destroyed her career in 10 seconds flat. Sometimes the most catastrophic mistakes happen when people feel most confident in their power. 30 minutes earlier, Aaliyah Washington, she used her maiden name at work, had parked her sleek black Tesla in the visitor section of Carter Tech Solutions. The license plate read DNA Love, an anniversary gift from her husband 3 years ago that now seemed prophetic. She clutched a handmade lunch container wrapped in elegant silver paper, inside which lay David's favorite Korean bulgogi that she had prepared at 5 a.m. before he left for his morning conference calls. Today marked their 5th wedding anniversary, and she wanted to surprise the love of her life at his office, a romantic gesture that would soon transform into something far more significant. The marble lobby gleamed under afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows as Aaliyah approached the reception desk, her heels clicking against the poly. She'd stone like a countdown to confrontation. "Excuse me," she said to Sarah, the young receptionist, her voice warm and polite. "I'm here to see David Carter. It's personal." Sarah looked up from her computer screen with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to managing executive schedules. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" The question was routine, professional, completely normal until Rebecca Stone materialized beside the desk like a storm cloud gathering strength. The head of human resources stood tall in her charcoal suit, arms crossed as she surveyed Aaliyah from head to toe, with the calculating gaze of someone who had made snap judgments her entire career. "The CEO doesn't meet with unscheduled visitors," Rebecca declared with the authority of someone drunk on corporate power. Aaliyah smiled politely, the kind of patient smile that comes from years of navigating microaggressions and systemic bias. "I understand, but this is a special occasion. Could you please?" "Special occasion?" Rebecca's voice dripped with skepticism, each word carefully chosen to humiliate. "What's your business with Mr. Carter?" "It's personal," Aaliyah repeated, adjusting her Hermes Kelly bag, leather that cost more than most people's monthly salary, though Rebecca seemed determined not to notice such details. The dismissal was already forming in her mind, the assumptions crystallizing into cruel certainty. "Personal." Rebecca rolled her eyes theatrically, ensuring that nearby employees could witness her performance of protective authority. "Let me guess, another woman with personal business trying to get to our wealthy executives." Heat crept up Aaliyah's neck as the familiar sting of prejudice washed over her. She had dealt with this before, the assumptions, the stereotypes, the automatic dismissal, but never this blatantly, never this publicly. "I'm his wife," she said quietly, her voice carrying the simple dignity of truth. Rebecca's laughter was sharp and cutting, designed to wound. "His wife? David Carter's wife?" She gestured dramatically to the growing audience of employees. "Do you see any resemblance here, people?" 3 employees had stopped to watch, then 5, then 8. Phones appeared in hands like deadly flowers blooming in spring, ready to capture whatever drama was about to unfold. "Women like you," Rebecca continued, her voice rising for maximum theatrical effect, "always have ulterior motives. Gold diggers, social climbers, whatever you want to call yourselves." Aaliyah's fingers tightened on her bag strap as her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Looking forward to lunch. Love you." The irony was almost unbearable. Here was the love of her life expressing excitement for their anniversary surprise while she stood in his lobby being publicly humiliated by his own employee. Jerome, the security guard, approached reluctantly. He had worked at Carter Tech for 3 years and knew all the executives' families from company picnics and holiday parties. Something about this woman looked familiar, but Rebecca was his supervisor's boss, and corporate hierarchies have their own brutal logic. "Jerome, perfect timing," Rebecca announced with the satisfaction of someone calling in reinforcements. "Please escort this woman out. She's harassing our staff." I'm not harassing anyone, Aaliyah replied, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest like acid. I brought my husband lunch for our anniversary. She pulled out her phone, showing the lock screen, a photo of her and David at last year's company Christmas party, his arm wrapped lovingly around her waist, both smiling at the camera with the genuine happiness of people deeply in love. Rebecca barely glanced at the evidence before D. Dismissing it with a wave of her hand. Photoshopped nonsense. You people are so desperate these days. The words hit like physical blows, each syllable carefully chosen to dehumanize and diminish. You people. Aaliyah had earned her MBA from Wharton, worked 6 years in corporate consulting before marriage, spoke 3 languages fluently, held a black belt in Taekwondo, and volunteered with literacy programs every weekend. But to Rebecca Stone, she was just you people, a category that existed only to be excluded, dismissed, and humiliated. Security cameras are recording this, whispered Martha, a longtime administrative assistant who had worked at Carter Tech for 12 years. She remembered when David started dating Aaliyah, had seen their engagement photos proudly displayed on his desk, had processed their wedding invitation list. But fear of corporate retaliation kept her voice barely audible. Rebecca whirled around with predatory intensity. Recording what? Me protecting our executives from opportunists? The crowd continued to grow as lunch break ended and curiosity drew more employees to witness what was becoming a public spectacle. Aaliyah checked her watch. 3:10 p.m. David's board meeting would end in 5 minutes, and she had planned to surprise him when he came downstairs for their scheduled lunch date. The timing that had seemed so romantic now felt like a countdown to disaster. Look, she said, pulling out her car keys with hands that trembled slightly despite her composure. The Tesla key fob caught the light, engraved with DNA Forever in elegant script, another symbol of their love that Rebecca refused to acknowledge. I can call him right now, Aaliyah offered, her thumb hovering over David's contact. It was a reasonable solution, a simple way to resolve the misunderstanding. But Rebecca's response revealed that this had never been about proper procedures or security protocols. Don't you dare disturb Mr. Carter with your games, Rebecca snapped, turning to Jerome with the commanding authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. I said remove her now. Jerome shifted uncomfortably, caught between conscience and corporate survival. Company policy required him to follow HR directives, but every instinct told him something was desperately wrong. He had 3 kids, 2 still in elementary school, a mortgage on a modest house in Queens, and health insurance through Carter Tech that covered his wife's diabetes medication. He had seen Rebecca destroy careers before with subtle sabotage, negative performance reviews that appeared from nowhere, and mysterious budget cuts that eliminated positions just before Christmas. Ma'am, he said gently to Aaliyah, his voice heavy with reluctant duty. Maybe you could schedule an appointment? It was a weak suggestion, but it was all he could offer without risking his family's financial security. She's not scheduling anything, Rebecca interrupted with cruel finality. This is what happens when people don't know their place. The phrase hung in the air like smoke from a fire, toxic and revealing. Several employees exchanged uncomfortable glances while 2 junior developers quietly started recording on their phones, sensing that history was being made. Aaliyah's wedding ring, a custom design that David had created specifically for her, caught the light as she steadied herself against the reception desk. The same ring David wore on his left hand, visible in every company photo, every board meeting, every press conference where he discussed the values and principles that supposedly guided Carter Tech Solutions. But Rebecca Stone had never paid attention to such details, had never seen beyond her own prejudices to notice the truth standing right in front of her. I'm calling security, Rebecca announced, though Jerome stood right beside her in his uniform. Real security, not just building security. She meant police, and everyone in the lobby understood the threat. Aaliyah felt the walls closing in around her as 15 people watched in silence, their cameras recording every moment of her humiliation. Her anniversary surprise was crumbling into a public nightmare, and she could feel the weight of systemic racism pressing down on her shoulders like a physical force. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly across the silent lobby. Just call David. Tell him Aaliyah is here. It was a simple request, the kind of basic courtesy that any visitor might expect, but Rebecca's smile turned cold as she reached into the small refrigerator behind the reception desk where staff kept their drinks. Her hand closed around a water bottle with the deliberate motion of someone about to make a point. "No," Rebecca said, unscrewing the cap with theatrical precision. "You're leaving now." The bottle tilted, and 16 ounces of liquid humiliation streamed through the air toward a woman whose only crime had been loving her husband enough to surprise him with homemade lunch on their anniversary. Time slowed as the water arced through the afternoon light, and in that frozen moment, everyone present sensed that they were witnessing something that would change everything forever. The water hit Aaliyah's face with shocking coldness, soaking her silk blouse and pooling at her feet on the marble floor. Silence fell over the lobby like a heavy blanket, broken only by the sound of water dripping onto leather with the steady rhythm of a metronome counting down to disaster. 15 employees stood frozen, their phone cameras capturing every droplet of what would soon become the most viral moment in corporate discrimination history. Rebecca Stone smiled triumphantly, still holding the empty bottle like a trophy. "That," she announced to her captive audience, "is how we handle trespassers at Carter Tech Solutions." She had no idea that in less than 2 minutes, her victim's husband would step out of the executive elevator to find his beloved wife standing soaked and humiliated in his own lobby, and that her moment of perceived victory would transform into the most expensive mistake in the company's history. Sometimes justice comes swiftly to those who think they're untouchable, and Rebecca Stone was about to learn that lesson in the most public way possible. The elevator dinged with the soft mechanical sound that echoed through the marble lobby like a gunshot announcing the arrival of Judgment Day. All 25 pairs of eyes turned toward the executive elevator, the one that only accessed the top 3 floors and was reserved for suite executives and their guests. Rebecca's face went from triumphant red to ashen white in seconds as the polished steel doors slid open with the finality of fate itself. David Carter stepped out of the elevator, adjusting his charcoal suit jacket with the quiet confidence of a 34-year-old Korean-American CEO who had built Carter Tech from a garage startup into a $2.8 billion empire. His custom wedding ring, matching dragons intertwined to symbolize their Korean and African-American heritage, caught the lobby's afternoon light as he expected to find his wife waiting by reception for their anniversary lunch. Instead, he found 25 employees clustered around something, phones held high like torches in the darkness of a corporate nightmare. "What's going on here?" His voice carried the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms filled with billion-dollar investors, cutting through whispers and electronic beeping with surgical precision. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and David saw her immediately. Aaliyah stood in the center of the circle, water dripping from her hair onto the marble floors, her silk blouse clinging wetly to her skin, mascara streaking her cheeks in dark rivers of humiliation. The handmade lunch container lay forgotten at her feet, silver wrapping paper torn and soggy with the remnants of her romantic surprise. Time stopped as David processed the scene before him. "Aaliyah!" His voice cracked with confusion and rising fury. "Baby, what happened? Why are you—" He rushed toward her, corporate composure shattering like glass as his hands found her face, thumbs gently wiping away water and smeared makeup with the instinctive tenderness of a devoted husband. The gesture was unmistakably intimate, protective, and loving, the kind of touch that no one could fake or misinterpret. "Who did this to you?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that carried across the entire lobby with the promise of consequences. The space held its collective breath as 25 phones continued recording, but silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap under the tension of approaching justice. "I brought you lunch," Aaliyah whispered, her voice steady despite everything she had endured. "For our anniversary, someone told me people like me don't belong here." David's eyes swept the crowd methodically, cataloging every face and every witness to his wife's public humiliation. His gaze landed on Rebecca Stone, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The HR director stood frozen like a deer in headlights, her empty water bottle still clutched in white-knuckled fingers, her face now the color of ash as beads of sweat formed on her forehead. She had just realized that her moment of perceived authority had become her professional death sentence. "She who?" David's voice carried the dangerous quiet that made seasoned executives tremble in board meetings, the kind of controlled fury that was infinitely more threatening than shouting. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed soundlessly as employees stepped back instinctively, creating distance from her as if she carried a contagious disease. The circle expanded, leaving her isolated in the center of their collective judgment, while David pulled his monogrammed handkerchief from his jacket pocket. DNA Forever, embroidered in elegant script, and began gently dabbing water from Aaliyah's face. Martha, the administrative assistant who had watched in horror for 20 minutes, found her voice first. "Mr. Carter, I tried to tell her. Ms. Stone threw water at your wife and called security to remove her. She said Mrs. Carter was a gold digger trying to manipulate you." The words hung in the air like an indictment, each syllable adding weight to the crushing realization of what had just transpired in his own company lobby. David's jaw tightened visibly as he continued caring for his wife with movements that spoke of years of love and devotion. "How long has this been going on?" he asked softly, his voice carefully controlled but vibrating with barely contained rage that everyone present could feel like electricity in the air. 20 minutes, Aaliyah replied, her dignity in toss. It's tea despite the public humiliation. I showed them our wedding photo, the appointment in the computer system. I told them repeatedly that I was your wife. She called me a liar and said I was photoshopping pictures to trick you. The breathing pattern of every person in that lobby changed as they recognized the signs of David Carter truly angry. The slight tension in his shoulders, the careful modulation of his voice, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched at his side. Colleagues who had worked with him for years knew that David Carter furious was infinitely more dangerous than David Carter shouting. His fury was ice-cold, calculated, and absolutely devastating in its precision. "Rebecca," he said, his voice carrying across the lobby like winter wind promising a storm. "My office, now." But then he paused, looking down at his wife's stained blouse, her ruined hair, her quiet dignity maintained despite 20 minutes of racist abuse. Something shifted in his expression as a different kind of justice began to form in his mind. "Actually, no," he said, his voice growing stronger with resolve. "We'll handle this right here, in front of everyone who witnessed what you did." He helped Aaliyah straighten, his arm encircling her waist protectively as he addressed the crowd with the full authority of someone who owned the building they stood in. "For those of you who don't know, this is my wife, Aaliyah Washington Carter. We've been married 5 years as of today. This is our wedding anniversary. She has an MBA from Wharton, speaks 3 languages fluently, and volunteers with literacy programs every weekend. She came here today to surprise me with lunch she prepared at 5 o'clock a.m. before I left for morning conference calls. She brought homemade bulgogi, my favorite, wrapped in silver paper with a handwritten anniversary card." His voice gained strength with each word as he gestured to the soggy container on the floor. Instead of being welcomed into the building her husband built, someone threw water in her face, called her a gold digger, and tried to have her arrested for bringing her husband lunch on their anniversary. The truth of it was so absurd, so cruel, so fundamentally wrong that several employees gasped audibly. Rebecca found her voice, desperation making it shrill and defensive. "David, I was protecting you. She didn't identify herself properly. Anyone could walk in here claiming to be your wife." The excuse sounded hollow even to her own ears, but she pressed forward with the desperate logic of someone watching their career collapse in real time. "She didn't identify herself," David repeated, his eyebrows rising with dangerous incredulity. "With her appointment clearly listed in our computer system, with wedding photos displayed on my desk upstairs, with her name on the permanent visitor access list that you personally approved last year?" Each question hit like a hammer blow, and Rebecca's face crumbled as the logical holes in her defense became obvious to everyone present, including the thousands of people now watching the live stream. "You processed her health insurance paperwork as my spouse," David continued relentlessly. "You've seen her at company Christmas parties, summer picnics, and board dinners. You didn't recognize her because you never truly saw her. You saw a black woman asking for access to power, and you decided she didn't deserve basic human dignity." The truth of systematic racism hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been burning unnoticed for far too long. Martha stepped forward, her tablet clutched against her chest like armor. "Mr. Carter, I have the security footage queued up and the appointment logs." But David cut her off with a gesture. His attention focused on something bigger than just this single incident. "I don't need footage. I have 25 witnesses and about 4,000 people watching this unfold in real time." He looked directly into the nearest phone camera, addressing the growing online audience with the gravity of someone making history. "This is David Carter, CEO of Carter Tech Solutions. What you've witnessed here today is completely unacceptable. It violates every principle our company claims to represent, and it ends right now." The words carried the weight of corporate authority backed by moral certainty, and even through phone screens, viewers could feel the power of a leader taking responsibility for change. He turned back to Rebecca, who seemed to physically shrink with each passing moment. "Rebecca Stone, you are terminated from Carter Tech Solutions, effective immediately." The finality of it echoed through the lobby like a judge's gavel, but David wasn't finished. His protective fury had transformed into something larger, corporate accountability that would reshape not just his company, but potentially the entire industry. "There's something else everyone here should know," he said, his arm tightening around Aaliyah's shoulders as she reached into her still damp purse and pulled out a waterproof folder. "My wife has been conducting research for the past 6 months, working with workplace equality nonprofits, documenting patterns of discrimination in corporate hiring practices. This wasn't a random visit, this was a test, and Carter Tech Solutions just failed spectacularly." Rebecca's legs nearly gave out as the implications hit her like a tsunami. Around her, employees exchanged glances of horror and fascination, suddenly understanding they had witnessed something much bigger than workplace rudeness. They had seen the exposure of systematic corporate discrimination caught on camera and broadcast to the world. Aaliyah opened the folder with steady hands, revealing professionally printed charts and graphs that she had come prepared to share. Over the past 18 months, Carter Tech Solutions received 847 qualified applications from Black candidates. Of those applications, 731 were rejected at the initial HR screening level. Her voice carried clearly across the silent lobby as she continued. During that same period, 1,230 white candidates applied for similar positions. Only 312 were rejected at HR screening. The statistical probability of this disparity occurring through random chance is less than 0.003%. The mathematical proof of systematic racism hit the lobby like a physical blow. Several employees gasped audibly as they realized they had been working for a company that systematically excluded qualified people based solely on the color of their skin. The numbers were undeniable, overwhelming, and legally damning in their stark revelation of institutional bias. This research was conducted in partnership with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, David added, his voice carrying the authority of federal backing. The documentation is legally admissible evidence of systematic discrimination. Rebecca collapsed into the nearest chair, her body finally giving out under the weight of revelation. 22 years in human resources, a 6-figure salary, stock options, and corporate respect, all evaporating because she couldn't see past her own prejudices and recognize the humanity in every person who walked through their doors. Every single person you discriminated against had families to support, bills to pay, dreams to achieve, Aaliyah continued, her voice gaining strength as she looked around the lobby, making eye contact with employees who had watched her humiliation. The only difference between them and the candidates you approved was the color of your skin. The difference between me and them is that I have a CEO husband to protect me. But I refuse to let that protection be wasted on just one person when systematic change could help hundreds. David felt a surge of pride for the brilliant, courageous woman beside him who had transformed personal pain into the possibility of societal progress. Carter Tech Solutions will implement immediate and comprehensive reforms, he announced to the crowd, and the live stream audience that had grown to over 8,000 viewers. New hiring protocols with blind resume screening, diverse interview panels for all positions, third-party auditing of our recruitment processes, and partnerships with Howard University, Morehouse College, and Spelman College to establish paid internship pipelines. But the most stunning announcement was yet to come. We're also establishing a $10 million fund for workplace discrimination research and legal assistance for victims of employment bias. This isn't just about fixing our company, it's about changing the entire industry. $10 million. The number resonated through the lobby and across social media like a declaration of war against systematic discrimination. As security guards approached Rebecca for her walk of shame, phones continued recording every moment. The woman who had wielded power like a weapon against the vulnerable was now powerless herself, escorted from the building she had helped poison with her prejudice. The live stream had reached over 10,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly, with hashtags like #CarterTechDiscrimination and #WorkplaceJustice trending nationally alongside #CorporateAccountability. 3 months later, the transformation was complete and stunning in its scope. The bronze plaque beside Carter Tech's main entrance now read, Carter Tech Solutions, Certified Best Place to Work for Diversity 2024. Digital screens in the lobby displayed real-time metrics showing their progress. 47% women, 34% people of color. Numbers that represented not just statistics, but human lives and dreams that had been given the opportunity they deserved. Aaliyah, now Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer with a $15 million budget, had transformed the company from a discrimination liability into an industry leader. Their new blind resume screening system had produced remarkable results. Black candidate advancement increased 340%, Hispanic candidates up 280%, women in technical roles up 190%. When managers couldn't see demographics, they focused purely on merit, and the company's performance soared. The financial victory was equally impressive. CFO Michael Torres reported that diverse teams generated 23% more revenue per project. Customer satisfaction improved 31%. And employee retention increased 45%, saving $8.2 million annually. Settlement costs had totaled $67 million for the 731 discrimination cases, but improved performance generated $94 million in additional revenue. They hadn't just recovered their costs, they had exceeded them dramatically. Jerome, the security guard who had been caught between conscience and authority, now served as employee advocate, managing an anonymous reporting system that logged 247 incidents in the first month, all resolved within 72 hours. People aren't afraid anymore, he told DOJ investigators. They know their voices matter. The cultural transformation was reflected in employee surveys, showing 94% felt valued and respected, up from 67%. Rebecca's consequences were severe, but led to genuine growth. Her wrongful termination laws. Hewitt was dismissed, and unable to find HR employment, she enrolled in diversity certification programs. Her public apology became required reading in business ethics courses. I let unconscious biases override professional judgment. I caused immeasurable harm to qualified individuals who deserved better. She now worked at a nonprofit for $42,000 annually, compared to her former $180,000 salary, but her work helping other companies identify unconscious bias had become a model for restorative justice in corporate settings. 1 year later, Aaliyah Washington Carter stood at the podium of the National Civil Rights Conference, addressing 3,000 business leaders with the authority of someone who had transformed personal humiliation into systematic change. Behind her, a screen displayed Carter Tech's transformation metrics as she spoke to an audience that included CEOs taking careful notes. Workplace discrimination isn't just morally wrong, she said, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. It's economically devastating. Companies lose billions annually by rejecting talent based on bias instead of merit. The woman who had been humiliated in a corporate lobby had become the most sought-after voice in workplace equity, her story inspiring federal legislation requiring diversity reporting from all companies with government contracts. The ripple effect of 20 minutes in a marble lobby had created the largest workplace equity movement in decades. Carter Tech's story transformed from viral scandal to business case study taught at Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. 12 Fortune 500 companies implemented identical reforms, and the Carter Standard became shorthand for workplace equity across industries. As Aaliyah concluded her conference speech, she looked directly into the cameras broadcasting live to millions of viewers worldwide. Workplace discrimination happens every day in corporate America. Most victims don't have CEO husbands to protect them, but they deserve the same dignity, the same opportunity, the same justice. If you've experienced discrimination, document it, record it, share your story. Your voice can change entire corporate cultures. She paused, making eye contact across the auditorium filled with business leaders who held the power to transform their own companies. If you've witnessed bias and stayed silent, remember that neutrality enables injustice. Use your privilege to protect those who can't protect themselves. The audience rose in sustained applause as her words sparked a movement that would continue long after the cameras stopped rolling. That evening, as Aaliyah and David reviewed social media responses to her speech, #Speak Up for Justice was trending worldwide. Comments poured in from workers sharing their own discrimination stories, companies announcing new diversity initiatives, and students declaring careers in workplace equality. Their story had become proof that individual courage could spark systematic transformation, that documented injustice could demand accountability, and that love, both for each other and for justice, could overcome even the most entrenched institutional bias. The most powerful weapon against workplace discrimination, they had learned, wasn't anger or revenge. It was documentation, strategic action, and the absolute refusal to let bias win. 20 minutes of humiliation had created a legacy of change that would protect countless others for generations to come, transforming one woman's painful experience into hope for millions facing similar battles in corporate America.